Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to AP Seminar. My name is Ruida Hassan.
I'm Marcelo.
I'm Mala.
And I'm Erica. Kids every day are excited to go to school and learn, but how can they succeed if some students are exposed to different opportunities than others? With no federal laws on how money should be distributed to school districts, it's no secret that there is an unequal distribution of funds throughout the system. Many different factors play into the inequity of the system, with things like insufficient resources, separation of location, and lack of attendance. This information has led our group to our research question, which explains how the public school funding formula has negatively affected school districts' overall achievement.
For years, student achievement has been affected negatively, with lack of resources with no way of updating school resources. Because of tight budgets, schools have to focus on alternative ways of obtaining that budget or resource. For an example, a school district in Wisconsin named Southern Door County didn't have enough funds, so they had to extract $200,000 out of their savings account. This led the district into having a single principal managing two different schools.
In 2015, a study was done by Natasha Ushomersky and David Williams that stated the highest poverty districts in our country receive about $1,200 less per student than the lowest poverty districts. For 1,000 student high school, that means $1.2 million in missing resources. If this continues in the future, it means that schools will continue to not have the resources needed in order for students to succeed. In this video, a school counselor named Lakia Wilson shows how due to the school not having enough money, they couldn't afford a teacher for band. So they had to cut the band program.
According to the U.S. Department of Education, nationally high poverty districts spend 15.6% less per student than low poverty districts do, and it can irreparably damage a child's future, especially for kids from poor families. In an article by Alana Samuels, Violet Jimenez, a Connecticut teacher, stated, "Without money, there's just a domino effect. Students frequently had substitutes because teachers would get frustrated and left. They didn't have as much time to spend on computer projects because they had shared computers, and they were suspended more in the poor districts instead. And in wealthier areas, teachers and guidance counselors would have time to work with misbehaving students rather than expelling them right away. Connecticut created a system called Next 10 to measure English, math skills, college, and career readiness. Bridgeport, a high poverty area, had an average score of 59.3%. In Greenwich, a low poverty area, had an average score of 89.3%. Now, due to their lack of resources, they are far behind from other districts in the area.
Another problem is graduation rates. Knowing it costs more to send a poor kid to school and graduate, many districts across the United States are falling behind the national average. In an article by Ben Cosman for The Atlantic magazine, it states that low-income graduation rates hit 80% or higher in only 6 states. This leaves kids who are in low-income areas who don't graduate to continue the cycle of poverty, which all boils down to the fact that they don't have enough sufficient resources so they can't graduate. Race plays a crucial part in funding as well. Schools who are generally in underfunded districts have more minorities, whereas schools who have more money are generally white, further proving the saying that minority children have to work twice as hard to get half as far as their white peers.
Some might find this absurd, while saying that, well, why do I have to worry about them when my school district is thriving? But the fact is, if we provide students with less resources, they will actually not only fall behind from the rest of the country, they will actually impact their future lives and their children's lives. Attendance also has played a huge role in the funding formula of public schools. According to an article by Daryl Burnett II, the state's funding formula labeled this district Southern Door property rich, which means that the state has made the district rely more and more on property taxes. The state only provides the district with only $1 million. That is $2.6 million less than what they offered over a decade ago. And also keep in mind that they only had 200 more students.
With states regulating districts to rely more on property taxes, their location plays a role in how much money they receive as well as the attendance of their students. As we all know, a school's attendance is greatly affected by the personal lives of its students. For an example, an article written by Emily Hanford, a senior education correspondent for APM Reports, gives an example of a student, Carlos Cruz, who lives in a high poverty area and basically admits to how his duties have bled into his school, saying, quote, "We got rent due, we got lights to pay, we got real life issues going on, and then your AX plus BX equals MC, which affects his ability to show up to school."
Attendance of the students has its own relation to funding that's separate from property taxes as well. When it comes to attendance-based funding formula, there are different student count methods. Some school districts count the number of students twice a year, while others take the average of the full year, and some only count once per year. The problem with only counting once per year is that in a research done by the University of Illinois, it states, in Indianapolis Public Schools, IPS, Student Superintendent Eugene White has claimed that some charter schools enroll students, receive a single count based on student funding, and then dump the students after which they have attended the IPS school without the associated state funding. According to the article again by Natasha Yershomowski and David Williams, districts get a majority of their money from the average daily attendance, ADA. That means that the higher their attendance is, the more money the school will receive.
Many will argue that it's a school's responsibility to make sure that their students are attending school, and if they can't, that's their fault. But schools in high poverty districts who receive students in high poverty areas don't have the money and resources to help their students go to school. It's time to help these schools, starting by eliminating the effect that attendance has on the public funding formula and giving money to schools who desperately need it.
Another obstacle in the school system is separation and location. This affects school education because of different funding systems for different areas.
The main reasons for separation of school districts has to do with the demographic of the city as a whole. In an article explaining the effects of urban and suburban dichotomy by Gabriel A. Reach, a professor at the University of Virginia, explains the negative effects wrought up by redlining, which is the refusal of money/loans to people because of the area they live in being deemed poor, to Virginia's demographic, as you can see here in this map showing the unnatural shapes that result from it. This affects the school district's funding because now different corporations and state governments decide, based on new county lines being drawn by redlining, who they would like to provide money to, focusing on giving more money to places that are generally rich and white, with the less affluent schools receiving less funds because of the placement within the city, which puts them at risk for not having sufficient resources for their students, which again plays in a role in the student's individual achievement. This provides a new level of inequities in the public school funding formula. Now cities are deliberately trying to divvy up funds and that are separated with years of inequities, favoring affluent areas over impoverished ones.
Funding heavily relies on local property tax. High poverty areas have lower income values and collect less taxes. For example, a Chicago area might have $9,794 to spend on each of its students, while another district has 3 times that.
From the article, State Education Funding is in the Legal Spotlight, it states, and I'll quote, since the 1980s, school funding cases have been focused on whether state has sufficiently funded the education systems. Plaintiffs argue that the state has the responsibility to ensure all children have access to quality education opportunities.
The independent school district versus Rodriguez trial made it to the Supreme Court. It was followed by a father who had a son who went to Edgewood, a predominantly poor Latino district, which is across town from a largely white district that had one of the best funded schools. Rodriguez had a son who went to a school where floors had been condemned, black books, and teachers weren't certified. He argued the funding system violated the 14th Amendment. However, in a 5-4 decision, the court ruled against Rodriguez, saying there is no right to equal funding.
In 2015, Vermont has spent over $20,795 per student, and also has lost 1/10 of their student population in the last decade. Also, they are in practice with a new budgeting system that has raised all the taxes around the school districts and merging 150 districts into only 38. Unlike in Arizona, the student population has doubled, and teachers are complaining about overcrowded classrooms. As you can see on the infographic, that Vermont funds their schools with way more than Arizona. So why is it fair that Vermont flourishes while they leave Arizona to sit there and fend for itself?
Where a student lives has not only affected where they go to school, but also how well they do in school. Students who live in high poverty areas are faced with difficult challenges and obstacles. They not only have to worry about school, but also real life issues that affect them just as much or even more than receiving an F on a test does. Previously mentioned student Carlos Cruz is living proof that poverty affects your success in high school. Understanding that some kids aren't as fortunate as others and can't always make school their #1 priority, districts should provide schools with students like Carlos more money to help provide resources to make their education worth something.
Although there are states that do give more money to the higher poverty school districts, there are still states that don't give enough money. According to the study done in the article by Natasha Yershomowski and David Williams, the highest poverty school districts receive about $2,200 or 18% less per student than low poverty districts. The more we ignore the problem, the more at-risk schools and students become to a number of things, including the loss of their accreditation and the hopeless loop of never-ending poverty that will continue to further the divide between the rich and the poor.
All these issues obviously impact the ability of school districts and students from reaching their ultimate potential. This can be amended though, not only to help the people escape the cycle of poverty, it can also eliminate the distraught they've been facing for years. But we can also build the gap between the national overall success or educational success, and our first solution is by making taxes that tax legislator officials to enforce the pressure of making efficiency, tax distribution, and equity learning environments.
In an article by Bruce D. Baker and et al., a fair funding system would allow high poverty districts to hire greater numbers of staff relative to their student population in order to provide the extra resources and supports to meet greater student needs. This could help students and districts flourish by providing everyone with the same amount of funds that isn't affected by location in a more unbiased, efficient way of equally distributing funds. Our second solution is to make sure that the public funding formula isn't affected by a school or district's attendance average by giving the money to schools in dire need of it. By doing this, we could provide schools who need the money to fix the problems causing their attendance-related issues. Schools with students in high poverty could use the money to add a washer or dryer to their schools so kids could come to school in clean clothes. And that's just one of the many examples that the money could go towards.
Lastly, making educated teachers teach in inner city or urban schools by reframing the urban and suburban dichotomy mindset to a metropolitan one. This could help by eliminating the lines driving to separate the less fortunate districts and the more fortunate ones from each other and make the city whole. This way, all districts are able and success in district resources aren't affected by things like socioeconomic status and race.
The current public school funding formula has made it difficult for students to succeed by separating different school districts with unequal distribution of funds. For years, the irregular distribution of said funds has affected many things, including culture, economy, politics, and the future of our students and their achievements. By realizing that sometimes the word equal doesn't always mean fair, we can eliminate one more problem in a world full of them. And with all the problems in the world, shouldn't school, a crucial part in the road to success for any student, be the one safe haven where every student has an equal opportunity to prosper? Thank you.
Okay. Erica, what is one way that your team's resolution makes you think differently about your original research?
So like out of our 3 solutions that we had, like pick one?
Just the conclusion that you came to, as opposed to how does it change the way that when you were doing your individual research by yourself?
So, repeat the question one more time, please.
And it's okay, what is one way that your team's resolution, so when you're all together, changed the way that you were originally thinking about it when you were doing research by yourself?
I honestly didn't see how we were going to come up with different ways. I only thought that really there was only one way of like how kind of like money got to school districts and stuff, but when we all came together, I realized that there's many different factors that play into it, that come into it. I didn't think that there was, like I didn't think about how the location affects it, and...
Okay. Malath, describe how the content of the team presentation was changed as a result of discussion, talking with your team.
Well, when we started, we only focused on one lens, but when we talked about it, our lens started bleeding up to each other, and it made us realize other people's point rather than just looking at it from one perspective.
Marcelo, reflecting on your colleagues' work, which one had the greatest impact of your overall understanding of the problem that you identified?
Ooh, that's a good one. Honestly, I think economics, and because as I work and I see all of my taxes going away, I feel like when I never know where my taxes go, but now knowing that a lot of taxes actually go to schools, and knowing that depending on where you live, that it affects that school that's closest to you. So I feel like it changed my point of view. Wait, can you repeat the question again?
Reflecting on your colleagues' work. So you're supposed to pick one person whose work changed your thinking the most.
Oh, okay. Okay, sorry. Okay, so basically, yeah, it was a lot, because it basically just made me think about the problem in a different lens, meaning not always political on oh well, what congressman or what legislator makes the laws and all that kind of stuff on what the students are going to be learning, what the resources they're going to get provided. It's more of the economic lens where it's well, where does the money come from? Where do the resources come from? So.
Okay. Rueda, give one specific way that your thinking changed as a result of Erica's findings. That's one you wanted.
Oh, okay.
No, she just goes, I like 3.
Erica's fine?
Mm-hmm.
Teachers? Yeah, okay.
Marcelo's findings, I mean.
Okay, actually, that was
I'm someone's finding.
It's fine.
I don't know, you were giving us questions. It's kind of like, I don't know what to say. Okay, so Erica had a futuristic lens, and she was kind of looking at all 3 of our claims and how it affects students' achievements in the future. And I didn't really think about how badly students' attendance affects their future. Well, I mean, the school's attendance, how they give money, the count thing, I can't put it to words. Okay, so.
Okay, yay!